Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to extend the discussion we've already been having about how the Chancellor expects British businesses to adapt to having no customers after Brexit, to how now the Home Secretary is preparing plans that will also expect businesses to adapt to having no workers either. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and political commentary, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, is reported to be presenting plans to Cabinet this week sometime for the government's three-tier immigration policy, which is supposed to be styled on the Australian model. It goes something like this. So tier 1 are your highly skilled workers, and these will be fast-tracked through immigration. 2 is your skilled workers, who will be permitted to enter the UK if they have a job offer. And 3, the unskilled workers, who are only permitted into the country if there are staff shortages. And on the face of it, that all sounds fine. Certainly to the bulk of the British population. There'll be no arguments there about that sort of immigration policy, if you're going to have an immigration policy at all. However, thinking about it in more detail should throw up 2 large problems when you look at it, which I'd like to explain. So the first one is that the government wants this policy to be in place for the day after the transition period ends. So we have the transition period up until the end of 2020. At least that's the plan at the moment. It is still not certain. And then the day after, which is supposed to be the 1st of January 2021, this immigration policy comes into effect. Well, that's fine. Everyone would say that's no problem because that's what we want, isn't it? Okay, is it? The problem is that, let's say the government had this all ready to go right now. It was all sorted out. They'd worked it all out. The information is being made available to businesses in terms of the systems they're going to have to go through in terms of employing someone. And let's say that that were the case and it was all ready to go tomorrow. That means you're giving employers less than a year to implement these systems. And remember, they've got to go through how they implement it themselves. Now, they'll need to ensure that they know who can be recruited and from which countries of origin. After all, how is skilled and highly skilled distinguished? Are there going to be any guidelines there? What if they think they're employing someone that is highly skilled and it turns out they're simply skilled? So they're stuck waiting to get through immigration for 6 months and you want your employee. One gets through relatively quickly. And I say relatively quickly. This is still doubtless going to involve lots of new staff, because that's the other problem here. Are the government training people up to be able to cope with this extra workload? I haven't seen any sign of it. And I've looked as well. It's not just, obviously I'm not going to see signs of it, but I have looked and I haven't seen any obvious signs of it. And, so highly skilled will get through immigration fairly quickly. You should be able to employ them and get them in post reasonably quickly. Simply skilled means they could be stuck in immigration. They could be stuck in the system for God knows how long. It matters. But the policy isn't ready to go to tomorrow. There are no details for employers to prepare for. So when are they going to get them? It's only been presented to Cabinet this week. This is a long way off being prepared. It could be argued that there already isn't time for businesses to adequately prepare for this, but they can't even begin until the government sorts its end out. And this is a government with no appreciation for realities, no appreciation for business. Which, now that I think about it, is a really strange thing to say about a Conservative government, because say what you will about the average Tory minister, and I have said plenty in my time and will doubtless do so again, they do at least tend to bend over backwards to help employers. That has never really been an issue before. Not anymore, it seems. It's now the party of the hedge fund manager. So there's going to come a point where businesses will be given the new immigration rules and systems and forms to fill in and guidance and all the rest of it that they're going to have to wade through, and it will not be a short document. But how long, when they get that, will there be before it comes into effect? Because all businesses know at the moment is the intention is for this to come into effect on the 1st of January 2021. But they don't know how long they've got to prepare for it. Under the previous plans, before Boris Johnson took an axe to them, there was going to be a grace period that allowed employers to get up to speed. So it would be all sorted out. It's all there. Little bit of a grace period before this immigration policy comes online. Now, they might only get the rules a few weeks before they come into force. And if you're an employer, and I know what you might be thinking, don't be ridiculous. They're not just going to give us a few weeks. That would be balmy because that's impossible. You have to bear in mind, this is Boris Johnson we're talking about. It's Priti Patel, it's Sajid Javid. Think about what they've already been saying and doing. Do you really think they're showing any consideration whatsoever for business realities? They're not interested in economics, only politics. And they don't know much about politics, so their politics is extremely clumsy. So yes, the first major problem is that businesses will not be given the time or guidance to adapt to the changes. We also have the side issue, as I said, where the massive number of immigration officials that will be required are, they're not going to be there to do it. So there's going to be a load of things gumming up the works. But then there's a second major problem, even though that first major problem is a whole knot of mini problems, really. And the second major problem I would say is with that third tier. The third tier, remember, is the unskilled workers can only come into the country if there are shortages. So that basic notion, again, you just say that to a person, the average person in the street, they'll go, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. So the notion of only allowing unskilled workers in if there are shortages sounds absolutely fine to most people. After all, you're talking about unskilled jobs. If unskilled jobs are out there and there are British citizens unemployed, well, then they can do those jobs. That all fits. Yeah, of course. The problem is, who says whether there are shortages or not? Because, if an employer has vacancies that are going unfilled, they can't get people in, they're advertising, they're telling the job centre this job's available, and they're not getting the people, then by any sensible definition, there's a shortage there. But if a computer says that there are unemployed people there milling around somewhere, then it won't flag as a shortage. Computer will say no. A classic example will be pickers for farms. Vacancies famously filled by seasonal migrants from Central and Eastern Europe in particular. Farmers have been struggling recently to get people into those jobs after the ones who were doing them were made to feel about as welcome as a fart in a swimsuit. So would this industry show as having staff shortages? What about other jobs that unskilled British workers are too lazy to apply for? Or what if the system that's set up to decide on whether there are shortages isn't realistic? It might go, well, there's a load of unemployed people in that general area, but what if that general area is very rural and those unemployed people can't physically get to the job? People should think that there's a reason why, in the first place, people from outside the UK are employed in unskilled work in the first place. It doesn't help the employer, assuming it's legitimate work, of course, because of the extra paperwork. So why would they do it? Because by definition, there are shortages if they're having to employ people from outside the country. And if people are going to counter by saying that the unemployed should be doing those jobs, then my question is, well, why haven't they? This government has been in power for 10 years now. Why hasn't that, if that's an issue, been fixed? And what sort of lunatic would suppose that a government that couldn't deal with this when it was a minor problem will suddenly be able to deal with it when it becomes a massive problem? And it becomes a massive problem because the immigration policy will switch on at a point where those businesses won't be able to fill up those vacancies and won't even have the safety valve of being able to try and attract people from overseas. So this shiny new three-tier system, I strongly suspect, will work in exactly the same way as the old system, only with more paperwork and fewer officials doing that paperwork, which means that the system gets clogged and costs the economy even more than Brexit naturally would of necessity. Because bear in mind one final little thing, this government, remember, this government that's been in place for 10 years, always talks tough on immigration, and look what it actually does in practice. So it says, oh yes, we must sort out immigration, we must sort out immigration. It throws a little side blame onto the EU, but that's irrelevant because our immigration policy is our immigration policy. It's got nothing to do with the EU. There are EU countries that have much tougher immigration entry requirements than we do. The reason we have such free movement in this country is because we know we need it. So the government knows full well we need more migrants, not fewer. We're not full. The country's not full, far from it. We need more. So what they do is they talk tough on immigration whilst doing nothing about it to keep people coming in because we need them, and then it blames the EU when someone points it out. They won't be able to blame the EU this time, so that's why I think this is going to be a wrecking ball. You know, this is the sledgehammer to crack a nut, and it's going to make a mess. So yeah, there it is. The party of business has you all covered for Brexit. All you need to do is to adapt to having no workers, as well as no customers, and you'll do great. So the ideal business model seems to be, well, doing what the Tory backers are doing right now, shorting the pound. Just make sure you get on Boris Johnson's mailing list so that you can time it correctly. You need to know when he's going to make his pound devaluing public statements. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.